Hey guys, welcome back to Mind Your Conversions, brought to you by Fiverr. If you're new here, this is where we break down the art and science of marketing with our hosts, Liv and Max. They will help you understand marketing better, explore fresh strategies, and most importantly, drive higher conversions. So whether you're a seasoned pro, or even if you're just getting started, you're at the right place.
Welcome back to another deep dive. You guys have been really into exploring different marketing strategies lately, and one of the things that's come up quite a bit is this idea of A/B testing frameworks. So today we're going to dive into a guide called A/B Testing Framework, a step-by-step guide.
Sounds good.
To kind of set the stage a little bit, imagine trying to set the price of a product using just like a coin flip or your gut feeling.
Ooh, that's scary.
It's a little bit risky, right? That's kind of what marketing without A/B testing can sometimes feel like.
Yeah.
But luckily, there's a more scientific approach to help us out here.
Right. A/B testing frameworks, they're all about data-driven decision-making. It's not just about guessing. It's about having a system to figure out what really works.
So you're saying it's not just running a test, it's having a whole strategy behind it.
Exactly.
Why is that framework so important?
Well, think about it. Even the biggest companies out there, like Google, Amazon, Netflix, they all use really sophisticated A/B testing frameworks.
Oh, wow.
They're not just throwing things at the wall and seeing what sticks.
Yeah, they're not just winging it. There's a method to their madness.
Right. They know that having a framework helps them get the most out of their tests and avoid common mistakes.
The guide mentions that the framework needs to consider industry specifics. Why is that so important?
Because different industries have different needs and their customers behave differently.
Okay, so what are some examples?
We'll take e-commerce, for instance. Speed and a smooth checkout process are super important there.
Makes sense.
So you might want to A/B test things like the design of your shopping cart or how many steps it takes to check out.
Oh, to reduce cart abandonment and stuff?
Exactly. But then you look at SaaS companies, and they might be more focused on things like onboarding flows.
What do you mean by that?
So how do you guide new users through your software?
Oh, okay.
How do you get them to understand its value as quickly as possible? So they might A/B test different tutorials or ways to introduce key features.
So the framework helps them ask the right questions depending on their specific audience. Okay, the guide also talks about this concept of planned experimentation.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a bit more about what that means?
Well, it's about treating your A/B tests like actual scientific experiments. You wouldn't just build a house without blueprints, right?
No way.
An A/B testing framework is kind of like that blueprint.
I like that analogy.
It forces you to define clear goals before you even start open. What are you trying to achieve with this test?
Okay, so you have to know what you're aiming for.
Right. Then you come up with a hypothesis,
Yeah,
a testable statement about what you think will happen,
I see.
and you decide on success metrics. How will you know if the test was successful?
So you're not just aimlessly gathering data, you have a specific purpose in mind.
Exactly. And all of this helps prevent wasted time and resources. You're testing with a clear goal, not just throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks.
Okay, so it's all about being intentional and strategic with your testing.
Yes,
The guide outlines this 9-step framework for successful A/B testing.
it does.
Want to walk through them together?
Sure. Let's start with the first step, defining clear goals.
All right, so why is that step so crucial?
Well, it's all about figuring out the why behind your test.
Mm-hmm.
What are you actually trying to achieve?
Okay, so are you trying to increase click-through rates on your ads? Or are you trying to boost conversions on a landing page?
Yeah, or maybe you're trying to reduce bounce rates on a particular blog post.
Oh,
Having a clear goal in mind keeps you focused and helps you measure the success of your experiment.
so you know whether all that effort is actually paying off.
Right.
All right, so we start with the why. What's the next step in building this framework?
Once you've got your goal, you need to formulate a hypothesis.
The hypothesis.
This is where you take your goal and you turn it into a testable statement.
Oh, okay.
So let's say your goal is to increase conversions on a product page.
Okay, yeah.
Your hypothesis might be something like changing the call to action button from blue to green will increase conversions by 15%.
I'm sensing there's some guesswork involved here.
Well, there is an element of assumption,
Right.
but your hypothesis shouldn't be pulled out of thin air.
Okay.
It should be based on some kind of research or data,
Oh, interesting.
like look at your website analytics,
Yeah.
user feedback industry, best practices, anything that can give you some clues.
So it's an educated guess, not just a random shot in the dark.
Exactly.
So we've got step 1, the why, step 2, the what we think will happen. What comes next?
Next, you need to identify your testing variable.
The testing variable.
That's the specific element you'll be changing in your A/B test.
Oh, okay.
So sticking with that product page example, you could test different button colors.
Like blue versus green.
Right. Or maybe you test the actual text on the button.
So like buy now versus add to cart.
Exactly. Or even the button's placement on the page. But here's the really important part. You should only test one variable at a time.
Why is that so crucial?
Because if you change multiple things all at once, you won't know what actually influenced the results.
Oh, that makes sense. It's like trying to figure out a recipe, but changing multiple ingredients at the same time.
Right. You'll end up with more questions than answers.
Yeah, for sure. So we isolate the variable to understand its impact.
Exactly.
What's step number 4 in our A/B testing adventure?
Step 4 is all about segmenting your audience.
What does that mean exactly?
It means dividing your website visitors into random groups to make sure your test results are fair and accurate.
Okay. I can see why that would be important. Why is that random segmentation so crucial for good data?
Well, let's say you're testing a new headline, but you only show it to people who have already bought something from your website. They're probably already pretty familiar with your brand and more likely to convert no matter what the headline says.
Right.
Your results wouldn't accurately reflect how a new visitor might react.
Oh, I get it. So randomizing things ensures we're not accidentally skewing the data.
Exactly. You want a representative sample of your audience to see how your changes affect different types of people.
Okay, so random segmentation helps us avoid biased data and get a more accurate picture of how things are working.
That's the goal.
Awesome. Now, what comes after we've segmented our audience? What's step 5?
Step 5 is where you actually create the variations for your test.
The variations.
So going back to our button example, you'd have your control version, which is the original blue button.
Right.
And then you'd have your modified version, which is the new green button.
Okay.
The key here is to make sure everything else on the page stays exactly the same.
Oh, to isolate the impact of that one change?
Exactly. That way you can be confident that any differences in results are actually due to the button color and nothing else.
I see. It's all about control, right?
Yeah.
Maintaining a controlled environment to get the most accurate data possible.
So precisely.
All right, what's next? What's step 6?
Step 6 is a big one. It's about determining your sample size and test duration.
Ooh, okay. I can see how those factors would be really important for the data we collect.
They are.
Can you explain a bit more about why sample size matters so much?
Sure. Imagine flipping a coin 10 times. You might get 7 heads.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean the coin is biased.
Right?
Right.
You need to flip it way more times to see the true probability.
Exactly. It's the same with A/B testing. A small sample size might give you misleading results because of random chance.
Oh, so it's like not enough data to really see a clear pattern?
Right. But with a larger sample size, you can be more confident that the differences you see are actually because of the change you made.
And not just because of random fluctuations?
Exactly. More data generally means more reliable results.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, what about test duration? How do we know how long to run a test for?
Well, the ideal duration depends on a few things, like how much traffic your website gets and how big of a change you're expecting to see. You want to run the test long enough to get enough data, but not so long that other things start influencing the results.
Oh, like what kind of things?
Well, think about things like holidays or big news events. Those can change how people behave online and mess with your data.
Yeah, that's true. You don't want external factors skewing the results.
Right. A good rule of thumb is to aim for at least a week, ideally 2 to 4 weeks.
Okay.
That gives you enough time to account for the ups and downs of website traffic and to reach what we call statistical significance.
Statistical significance. That sounds complicated.
I can do a whole deep dive on that another time. But basically it means you can be pretty confident that the results you're seeing are real and not just a fluke.
Okay, I'm following you so far. So we've defined our goals, formulated our hypothesis, identified our variable, segmented, our audience created our variations, and determined our sample size and test duration.
We're on a roll.
What's the next step? What do we do with all this information?
Now it's time to launch those variations and let the data roll in. This is step 7, conducting the test and tracking those results.
The moment of truth.
Exactly. And it's important to avoid making any changes to the test once it's live.
Like, what do you mean?
So don't tweak the variations or the segmentation while the test is running.
Oh, okay.
Because that could really mess with the data and make your results unreliable.
So resist the temptation to tinker mid-test.
Yeah, stay the course. Let the data speak for itself.
Now, when we're tracking the results of our test, how do we make sure we're actually measuring the right things?
That's where key performance indicators or KPIs come in.
KPIs.
These are the specific metrics that you're tracking based on your goals.
Okay, so examples.
So if you're testing a call to action button, you might track things like click-through rates, conversion rates, even the time people spend on the page.
Oh, I see.
You want to make sure you're gathering data that directly relates to what you're trying to achieve.
So it's not just about collecting data for the sake of data. It's about focusing on the metrics that actually matter for our goals.
Right. Got to make sure you're measuring the right thing.
Okay, so we're monitoring how people interact with the different versions of our test. And that's where we start to see patterns emerge, right?
That's right. Which brings us to step 8, analyzing the results.
Analyzing the results, the moment we've all been waiting for.
Yes. This is where you compare how the control version performed against the modified version.
Okay.
You're looking for statistically significant differences in those KPIs we talked about.
Statistically significant. We're going to need another deep dive to unpack that term.
Maybe, but for now, just think of it as a way to make sure the differences you see are real and not just due to chance.
Okay, fair enough. So we're looking for real meaningful differences between the two versions.
Exactly. So for example, if that green call to action button gets a 20% higher conversion rate than the blue button,
wow, that's significant.
and it's statistically significant, then you have strong evidence that switching to green is a good idea.
The data tells the story and guides our next steps.
That's the beauty of A/B testing.
So what's the final step in this framework? What happens after we analyze the data?
Step 9 is all about implementation and iteration.
Implementation and iteration.
So if your test results show a clear winner, you put that winning variation into action.
Got it. Make the change.
But remember, A/B testing isn't a one-time thing.
It's not.
It's an ongoing process. It's all about continuous improvement.
Oh, I see. So even when we find a winning variation, there's always room to keep testing and refining.
Exactly. So after you implement that green button, you might test different text variations or placements.
Oh.
Or even combinations of different elements.
So it's like we're always climbing that ladder, always looking for ways to optimize and improve.
That's a great way to put it. A/B testing is all about embracing that data-driven mindset.
Okay. So to recap, the 9 steps are:
Define clear goals.
formulate a hypothesis,
Identify the testing variable,
segment your audience,
the variation.
determine sample size and test timing,
Conduct the test and track results.
analyze the results.
And implement and iterate.
9 steps to A/B testing mastery.
It's a journey.
It is, but I can
Yeah.
already see how powerful this framework could be for marketers.
It is.
The next section of this guide focuses on adapting the framework for different business models.
Yeah, it does.
But before we get into that, can we go through a specific example of this framework in action, just to see how it all comes together?
Sure, let's imagine a company that sells online courses. They're trying to increase the click-through rate on the Enroll Now button for a particular course.
Okay, so they want to get more people clicking that button.
Right. Their goal is to see a 15% increase in clicks.
Okay, so that's step 1. They've defined their clear goal.
What's their hypothesis?
What did they think will make that happen?
They think that changing the button color from orange to blue will lead to that 15% increase.
Why blue?
Because they think blue is associated with trust and security, which might appeal more to potential students.
No, that's interesting.
They're going to test that theory.
Okay, so their testing variable is the button color.
Yep, they're going to keep everything else about the button the same, the text, the size, the placement, just changing the color.
All right, and how about audience segmentation? How are they going to divide up their website visitors?
They decide to split their traffic 50-50.
50-50?
Half the visitors will see the orange button, which is our control.
Right.
And half will see the blue button, which is our variation.
Got it. So they're randomly assigning people to see one version or the other.
That's right.
Okay, so we've got the goal, the hypothesis, the variable, the segmentation.
Yeah.
How about the variations themselves and the sample size and test duration?
So they set up 2 identical landing pages for the course.
Okay.
The only difference is the button color.
Oh, smart.
To make sure they get statistically significant results, they calculate that they need around 5,000 visitors in each group.
5,000. Okay.
And they decide to run the test for 3 weeks to capture data across different days and times.
All right, so they launch the test and they wait patiently for those 3 weeks to go by.
They do, and during that time, they're closely monitoring the test, making sure there aren't any other factors that could skew the results.
So no big marketing campaigns launching at the same time.
Right. They want to keep things as clean and controlled as possible.
Okay, so they're tracking clicks on both the orange button and the blue button.
Yep. And after 3 weeks, they dive into the data to see what happened.
The moment of truth. What did they find?
The results show that the blue button did outperform the orange button.
It did.
It did, but only by 8%.
So they didn't quite reach their goal of 15%.
They didn't, but 8% is still a statistically significant improvement.
Okay, so it's still a win.
It is. They decide to implement the blue button on their course landing page. But they also recognize that this is just the beginning.
Oh, how so?
Well, they could run further tests to see if they can boost that click-through rate even more.
Oh, interesting. What kind of tests?
Maybe they experiment with different button text or try moving the button to a different spot on the page.
So the testing never really stops. It's all about continuous improvement.
That's the heart of A/B testing. You're always learning, always iterating, always trying to find ways to make things better.
I love that mindset. It's like a never-ending cycle of experimentation and optimization.
And it all starts with that solid framework we talked about.
9 steps to data-driven decision-making.
It's a beautiful thing.
Okay, so we've seen this framework in action with a concrete example. Now I'm curious to learn how this same framework can be adapted to different businesses.
Yeah, me too.
Are you ready to dive into that?
I am.
All right, let's explore how SaaS companies, e-commerce businesses, media publications, and even healthcare providers might tweak these 9 steps to achieve their own unique goals.
That sounds like a great plan.
Awesome. Let's get to it.
Let's do it.
All right, so let's jump into how different industries can actually apply this A/B testing framework. We were just talking about online courses, but what about SaaS companies? Where should they be focusing their A/B testing efforts?
For SaaS companies, the landing page is super important. It's often the first impression a potential customer has of your product.
Right, so making that landing page as effective as possible is key.
Exactly. And A/B testing can help you figure out what resonates best with your target audience.
Okay, so what specific elements of the landing page should they be looking at?
They can experiment with headlines, imagery, video placement, even the overall layout of the page.
So testing both the visual design and how the information is presented.
Right. But it's not just about aesthetics. They also need to think about how those elements guide the user towards taking action.
Like signing up for a free trial or contacting sales.
Exactly. They might test different calls to action placements for testimonials, even the length of the sign-up form.
Oh, interesting. So it's about finding that balance between providing enough information without overwhelming people.
Exactly.
Now, beyond the landing page, are there any other areas that SaaS companies should be A/B testing?
Onboarding is huge for SaaS. You want new users to quickly understand the value of your product and start using it regularly.
Right. You don't want them to get lost or frustrated and abandon the software.
Exactly. So A/B testing different onboarding flows can help you figure out the most effective way to guide users through those initial steps.
Okay, so like testing different formats for tutorials.
Yeah, or the order in which features are introduced, or even the level of personalization in the onboarding experience.
So finding that sweet spot between being helpful and not overwhelming new users with too much information at once.
Right.
Makes sense. Let's switch gears a bit and talk about e-commerce companies. How do they approach A/B testing?
In e-commerce, it's all about removing friction in the customer journey.
Friction.
Yeah, any hurdles or obstacles that prevent people from completing a purchase.
Okay, so like a complicated checkout process.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Every extra step or confusing element can lead to lost sales. So e-commerce companies should be A/B testing things like cart design product pages and the overall checkout flow.
To make it as smooth and intuitive as possible.
Right. For example, they could test different versions of the shopping cart page.
Yeah.
Maybe they try adding a progress bar to show how far along the customer is in the checkout process.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Or they test a more minimalist design with fewer distractions.
I can imagine even small changes to the checkout process could have a big impact on conversions.
Oh, absolutely. And they shouldn't forget about testing different discounts and promotional offers, too.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point.
A/B testing can reveal whether a 10% off discount is more effective than a buy two, get one free offer,
Interesting.
or whether a pop-up discount works better than a banner ad. It's all about finding what motivates customers to take action.
So it's not just about the offer itself, but also how it's presented.
Exactly.
That's fascinating. All right, let's shift gears again. What about media and publishing companies? How does this framework apply to them?
For media and publishing, headlines are king. They're the first thing people see, and they determine whether someone clicks on an article or not.
Yeah, in a world overflowing with content, a captivating headline can make all the difference.
Absolutely. So A/B testing different headline variations is crucial for media companies.
Okay, what kind of variation?
Well, they might test a straightforward headline like 10 tips to improve your sleep.
Okay.
Against something more curiosity-driven, like the one sleep hack you probably never heard of.
Ooh, that second one definitely makes me want to click.
See? It works.
Beyond headlines, what else might media companies want to A/B test?
Subscription calls to action are another big one. They might experiment with different wording.
Like, start your free trial versus get unlimited access for 30 days.
Exactly. They want to find the language that resonates most with their target audience.
So it's all about finding those subtle tweaks that can make a big difference in conversion rates.
Yes. And did you know that website traffic can vary over 500% based on the headline alone?
Wow, that's incredible. That really shows the power of A/B testing in this industry.
It does.
All right, one more industry for you. How might travel and hospitality companies apply this A/B testing framework?
For travel and hospitality, the booking process is a key area for A/B testing.
Because any hiccups in that process could lead to people abandoning their bookings.
Exactly.
If it's too complicated or confusing, people will just go to a competitor. So they often test different versions of their booking forms, search filters, even how they present different room types or travel packages.
Oh, okay. So like experimenting with the layout of the booking form.
Right, or the number of steps involved, or how clear the instructions are.
So it's all about streamlining the process and making it as user-friendly as possible.
Exactly. And they might also A/B test different upselling and cross-selling techniques.
Oh, interesting. What do you mean by that?
So, like, how do they encourage customers to upgrade their rooms or add extra services like spa treatments or airport transfers?
Oh, okay.
Would a direct discount be more effective, or a pop-up suggesting a luxury upgrade? A/B testing can help them figure that out.
So it's about finding those little nudges that can influence people's decisions.
Right.
Okay, we've covered a lot of industries here, but one that's obviously super important is healthcare. How can healthcare providers leverage A/B testing?
In healthcare, clear communication and easy access to information are essential, especially when people are feeling stressed or unwell.
Exactly. So their websites and online platforms need to be user-friendly, and A/B testing can help with that.
Okay, so what specific elements should they be testing?
Well, they can A/B test the content on their website to make sure it's easy to understand and navigate.
Okay.
They might also test different ways to present information about medical conditions, treatments, or doctors on staff.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Especially for patients who are researching their options.
Right. And appointment booking is another key area. They might A/B test whether a detailed form or a simple calendar view with available slots leads to more bookings.
Interesting. So it's about finding the most efficient and user-friendly way to connect patients with the care they need.
Exactly. And with telemedicine becoming more popular, it's worth testing different platforms or features too.
Like video calls versus phone consultations.
Right. They can use A/B testing to see what patients prefer.
It's all about tailoring the experience to what people find most comfortable and accessible.
Precisely.
Wow, we've covered a lot of ground here, from SaaS to healthcare. It's amazing how this framework can be applied across so many different industries.
It is. It all comes back to those core principles we talked about: defining clear goals, formulating hypotheses, testing one variable at a time, analyzing the data to make informed decisions.
And speaking of informed decisions, the guide also includes a section on the do's and don'ts of A/B testing.
It does.
Before we wrap up, I'm curious to hear more about those because it seems like there's some easy mistakes to make if you're not careful.
You're right. Even with the best intentions, things can go wrong if you're not paying attention. So let's talk about what to do and what to avoid to make sure your A/B tests are effective and reliable.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground in our A/B testing deep dive, but before we wrap up, I'm really curious about these do's and don'ts you mentioned. It seems like there's some easy traps to fall into if you're not careful.
Yeah, there are. It's true. Even with the best intentions, things can go sideways if you don't keep some key principles in mind. Let's start with the do's. We've actually touched on some of these already, but it's worth repeating. First and foremost, only test one variable at a time.
Right, isolate that variable so you know exactly what's impacting the results.
Exactly. And make sure your sample size is big enough to be statistically significant. Remember that coin flip example?
Yeah.
If you only flip a coin a few times, you might get misleading results. It's the same with A/B testing. You need enough data to see real patterns.
So don't jump to conclusions too quickly.
Right. And make sure you're targeting the right audience segment. The people in your test should be representative of your actual target market.
Oh, yeah. Otherwise, the results won't be very useful.
Exactly. And don't forget about choosing the right tools. There are so many A/B testing platforms out there.
It can be overwhelming.
It can. So take some time to research and find the tools that fit your needs and your budget.
And one last do.
Pay attention to external factors. Things like seasonal trends, holidays, even major news events can influence how people behave online.
Right. You don't want those things skewing your data.
So keep an eye on the bigger picture and be mindful of the context in which you're running your tests.
Okay, all those do's make perfect sense. Now, what about the don'ts? What are the things we absolutely need to avoid?
One common mistake is testing things just for the sake of testing. Don't invalidate your hypothesis.
Meaning?
Make sure the thing you're testing is actually relevant to your goals and that your hypothesis is grounded in some kind of research or data. Don't just test random things because you think it might be interesting.
Have a solid rationale behind every test you run.
Exactly. Otherwise, you could end up wasting a lot of time and resources. And speaking of wasting time, another pitfall is changing things mid-test.
Ooh, I can see how that would be tempting.
It is. You might get a new idea or see something that you want to tweak, but resist that urge.
Okay.
Once you've launched a test, stick to the plan. Any changes you make could introduce bias and mess up your results.
It's like moving the goalposts during a game. It makes it impossible to get a fair outcome.
Exactly. And perhaps the most important don't is giving up too early A/B testing takes patience.
Oh, yeah, I can see that.
You need to collect enough data to draw meaningful conclusions.
Right.
So don't get discouraged if you don't see immediate results. Let the test run its course.
So stick with it. Trust the process.
Right. Now, before we wrap up, there are a few technical things to be aware of. These are a bit more advanced, but they can have a big impact on the accuracy of your results.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Lay it on me.
One thing to keep in mind is the potential impact of 302 redirects.
302 redirects. Refresh my memory on what those are.
They're temporary redirects that can sometimes be used during A/B testing. But if you're not careful, they can mess with your SEO.
SEO, our old friend, search engine optimization.
The one and only. So why are 302 redirects a problem?
I'm all ears.
Well, search engines like Google, they see a 302 redirect as a sign that the page is only temporarily unavailable. So they might not give your A/B test variations as much weight when they're ranking your website. It's generally better to use 301 redirects, which signal a permanent move if you need to redirect pages during your tests.
So using the wrong type of redirect could actually hurt our SEO efforts.
Exactly. Another technical thing to consider is caching and content delivery systems.
Oh, yeah, those things. Can you remind me how they work?
Sure. Caching is a way for websites to store static versions of your pages to make them load faster for visitors.
Okay.
And content delivery systems, or CDNs, distribute those cache pages across servers around the world.
To make sure people can access the website quickly no matter where they are.
Exactly. But while caching and CDNs are great for performance, they can sometimes interfere with A/B testing.
Oh, how so?
Well, imagine you're running a test, but some visitors are still seeing a cached version of the page.
Oh.
Which means they're not seeing either of your test variations.
Right, they're seeing an old version of the page, so that would totally throw off the results.
It would. So be mindful of caching and CDNs, and make sure your settings are configured correctly, or use A/B testing tools that can help you manage these systems.
Okay, so it's about being aware of how those behind-the-scenes systems can impact our tests.
Right. Now, another technical issue to watch out for is page flicker.
Page flicker, what's that?
It's when a web page flickers or flashes for a moment before showing the actual content.
Yeah, I've seen that happen. It can be kind of annoying.
It can. It's usually caused by things like slow loading times, coding errors, or even outdated hardware or software.
Okay.
And while page flicker is primarily a user experience problem, it can also mess with your A/B tests.
I can see that. If people are seeing a jumbled mess, they're not going to interact with the page normally.
Right. So if you're noticing page flicker, address the underlying technical issues to make sure your A/B tests are giving you accurate data.
Makes sense. Optimize for a smooth user experience and reliable test results.
Exactly. And one last technical pitfall to be aware of is cloaking.
Cloaking, that sounds kind of shady.
It is. It's a black hat SEO tactic that involves showing one version of your website to visitors and a different version to search engines.
Why would anyone do that?
Some people try to use it to manipulate search rankings. They might create a page that's stuffed with keywords that ranks well in Google, but then show a different, less optimized page to actual humans.
So it's like trying to trick the system.
It is. But search engines like Google are pretty good at detecting cloaking, and they penalize websites that do it.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it's a risky and unethical strategy. And I imagine it would completely mess up any A/B testing data, too.
Absolutely. Your results wouldn't mean anything because they wouldn't reflect how real people are using your site.
So the takeaway here is to always play by the rules, both for search engines and for your visitors.
Right. Honesty is the best policy.
Well said. Well, we've covered a ton of ground today, from the basic principles of A/B testing to the nitty-gritty technical details. It's been a fascinating deep dive.
It has. And I hope our listeners are feeling empowered to start experimenting with A/B testing on their own websites and marketing campaigns.
I think they are. Remember, folks, even small changes can have a big impact, and A/B testing gives you a framework to experiment in a smart and controlled way.
So start small, iterate based on the data, and don't be afraid to try new things.
Excellent advice. And that brings us to the end of another deep dive. As always, we appreciate you joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Happy testing, everyone.
Thanks for tuning in. That's it for this episode of Mind Your Conversions, brought to you by Fiverr. I hope you are leaving with fresh ideas and strategies to take your marketing and your conversions to the next level. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave us a review. Thanks for listening. Until then, take care, and we'll see you next time.